If you were shocked by Nick's actions in the latest episode of A Handmaid's Tale, I fear you weren't paying attention, because there absolutely were signs. I know, because I predicted it, and I'll explain them to you. But first, if you missed it, I just had the reveal for my cover for my family vlogging horror novel, You Watched in Silence. It follows a fan who becomes nanny to a canceled family vlogger on a cozy Washington island, but faces paranormal and parasocial horrors, and everything that happens in the book is based off things I've seen real family vloggers do. And you can reserve an early copy now, which helps me so much, because believe it or not, places like Barnes & Noble actually decide how much of a book they're going to stock based on these early reserved copies. So I would so appreciate your support. But if you cannot afford a hardcover right now, I get it. Another way you can support me is that we are going up on NetGalley, and you can request and like the cover there. If it is not on NetGalley when you are watching this, just check the next day. It's gonna pop up here real soon. But anyway, guys, when I'm right, right? There's so many things in this episode that I called. If you haven't been tuned into my Handmaid's Tale series for the final season, here's a little compilation of what I said. Nick, this is just a theory, but I'm kind of feeling like his father-in-law is on to him. I have a feeling that they knew that that eye was never going to fully recover. He was never going to come back enough to be able to tell people what happened. And I think that he told Nick that he was getting better just to see if he passed away shortly after Nick found out. If Nick would do something to that eye, signaling that Nick actually had something to do with it. Or I don't know where his character arc is going this season, but I could see him just standing with Gilead, settling down with Gilead, especially when his son comes. Maybe Commander Wharton is even a part of making him settle in Gilead, but I kind of don't think we're going to be super happy with what Nick decides to do, because he says that I did this for you. I had to see you, and so I had to become a spy. But that answer does not tell us that Nick doesn't stand by Gilead. It only tells us that Nick stands by June, and that's different than being against Gilead because he's against Gilead. And yes, he rebelled so much against Gilead, but he does it all on June's behalf. So did he only care about what Gilead was doing when he fell in love with June? And here's the thing, I was able to predict this because there were very real signs leading up to this point. And we will get into them, but first I want to talk a little bit about Serena in this episode, because I said in my last video that Serena is being the queen of the pick-me's once again. She is constantly seeking male validation at all costs. She has always wanted power. She has always wanted to be in a leadership position, but she is not the kind of woman who would have taken power if it was going to cost her the affection and attention of men, and that's why she did it the way she did it. She got up on stages and told women to stay at home and be a homemaker when she wasn't doing that herself. She got up on podiums and said, hey, men should be the heads of your household. Meanwhile, she was clearly heading her own household. She wanted to be important in Gilead. She wanted to be a thought leader, but she also wanted to be the perfect Gilead woman. So she espoused the views of men for them while living a life that was completely incongruent with those beliefs. And here she is again. She once again has the power that she wants so bad, like she had in America before Gilead. She's able to be a leader. Her ideas actually matter. She's making a difference. She can write again. She can have a career. But the very second that a man comes in and validates her, she caves. It's all over. And listen, I do believe that a woman can be a leader and have a career and fall in love with a man and be married. Of course I do. But this is clearly not about love with Commander Wharton. She does not have enough time to love this man. They have known each other for a matter of weeks. Has it even been a month? She's just flattered and once again in love with the idea of being wanted. And this is an opportunity for her to once again have her power, have her prestige, and still be the perfect married Christian woman. And June calls her out on exactly what I said in my last video, that she is subjugating herself. This is still Gilead. Once you marry that man, you have no say in what happens. He has all the say, all the power. And this is a man that comes from DC, a place that is more conservative than most of Gilead, certainly much more conservative than New Bethlehem. And at Serena's grown age, she should know that she doesn't know this man well enough to trust him, or even to know if she loves him and is compatible with him. But her answer to June is no, he's different than Fred, to which of course June is like, wasn't Fred different to Fred in the beginning? And June is completely and totally right. Fred was like the perfect husband for Serena before Gilead. He loved that she was so successful. He would go to her speeches, and the only time he spoke up was to clear the room for her to speak once more. He did not care about being on the sidelines. He loved cheering her on. You see so much joy in that man when his wife is up there speaking, being powerful, because as you know from my Fred character analysis, That's just the kind of woman that he's attracted to. Fred likes powerful, smart women, and he's not the kind of man who wants to take a natural leadership position in his relationship, which is fine. A lot of men don't. A lot of women run their households and are the major decision maker for those households. It would have been fine for Fred to want that in America, but he and Serena both created their own cage where their dynamics no longer worked. It's when he was forced into the box of what Gilead thinks a man was that he caved, that he became so deeply insecure that he was not measuring up to what a man should be. That is when he felt the need to put Serena in her place and prove that he could be a man. But Fred was quite literally the perfect guy for her pre-Gilead, and they were together for years, a long time before Gilead, a long time to feel like, I know this man, I know he's not going to switch up on me. And Gilead made him switch up on her, so she should know better than most that what a man seems like, even for years, may not be what he actually ends up being in a marriage dynamic. Fred changes after years, and yet she knows this man a few weeks, and she's like, no, he's genuine. I know it. This is real this time. Lady, at your age, absolute pick-me behavior. I don't think Serena really feels whole in any position that she's in if she does not have a man to be around and validate her. I think the patriarchy is just that much ingrained into her brain that she's never going to be satisfied if a man isn't saying, you're so great, you're doing such a great job. And I think that's also why she kept going back to Fred even after he kept disrespecting her and even took her finger. If there are noises in the background, I'm sorry, that's my cat. But speaking of Serena craving power, can we talk about how insufferable she is when she has power? On the train with June, she's all meek and kind and, oh, I'll help you, I'm so sorry. But then when they're back in Gilead, she's completely different. June confronts her and suddenly it's, oh, if what you're saying about Gilead is true, then that's very dangerous to say to someone like me, isn't it? Like, she can't help but put June in her place. Serena always needs to yield power over other people. That is just innate in her. She cannot help it. She's got to remind June of whose house she is, and despite the fact that June has done so much to help her. Serena kind of reminds me of like an abusive, narcissistic parent who can never admit that what they did to you was wrong, can never admit that what they did might not be forgivable. She's so mad June won't let it go when she did absolutely unforgivable things to June, things that most people would never be able to forgive. And it's not enough that June helped her. It's not enough that June is kind to her. No, she needs to forgive her. It's wild that June has ever even helped her at all, that June has even saved her life at all, and that's not enough for Serena. She will never be worthy of forgiveness, and this is why I do not believe she's ever going to get a redemption arc, because she flat out doesn't deserve one. She's not truly sorry the way that like you or me might apologize for something. She's sorry in the way that like, I'm going to say sorry and then I expect you to forgive me, not I'm truly sorry for what I did. Because if she was truly sorry for what she did, she'd be able to admit that it wasn't forgivable, that she did things so horrific it would be okay if June hated her for the rest of her life. She doesn't deserve anything from June. That is what true repentance would look like. If she really understood the gravity of what she did, she would understand June's anger, she would leave space for June's anger, and she wouldn't continue to make everything about herself. It's exactly like June said, like, finally, when I thought you changed, here you are doing the same thing. And she'll always do the same thing. She is not going to change. She doesn't want to change. She just wants to feel better about herself. And now that she's back in Gilead, she's doing the same crap. She's craving male validation, she's craving power, but it is not going to end well for her. I said it before, but I don't trust Wharton. He says very different things to Nick that he says to Serena. He's obviously from DC. I warned in my last video that I thought Wharton was on to Nick, that he sent Nick to the hospital on purpose to see if something would happen to that boy after Nick went to the hospital. And that's exactly what happened, and Wharton brought it up to Nick. I kind of think Wharton wants to have power over Nick and power over Serena, because these two are the most influential people in New Bethlehem besides maybe Commander Lawrence. So if he gets Nick under his thumb and he marries Serena, he becomes the most powerful person in New Bethlehem, and he can make it into whatever he wants to make it in. And I don't know what's gonna happen to Lawrence now. I said in the last video, I hope he realizes he's never gonna reform Gilead, and he's ready to just destroy it with June. And he was ready, and that doesn't surprise me because of what his character has shown me over the years. He has no love for Gilead, he has no love for these commanders, and unlike Serena, he has real guilt and shame. And I'm not saying that makes him redeemable. In fact, I think what makes him honestly sorry is the fact that he sees himself as not redeemable. He never tried to argue with his wife that he was redeemable. He never tried to argue with June that he was redeemable. He knew what he did could not be forgiven. He just wanted to change it, to make things better. Kind of the opposite of Serena. I don't think he's ever really craved power except when he can use power as a means to an end. Even before Gilead, I think that was the case. I mean, he obviously did horrible, awful things, but he thought he was moving things in the right direction, cleaning up the environment, fixing the fertility crisis. He was willing to do that at the cost of suffering of other people, so it is unforgivable. But he didn't want to just be in power. He thought he could make the world better, and it's kind of how he feels now. But now that Nick said what he said, I don't know what's going to happen to him. I don't know if Nick said that Lawrence was involved. If he did, I think it's a game over for Commander Lawrence, and I think The Handmaid's Tale tends to take away characters right when they are going to get exactly what they want, so I fear that might happen. But I'm not surprised he jumped on June's proposal, because that's just kind of how his character is. He's gonna do the thing that makes the most sense, and when he realized that Gilead was not redeemable, blowing up those commanders made the most sense. Even knowing what June did to his wife, I knew that he would do what he felt like was right. Commander Lawrence is just not the kind of guy who needs to like you to team up with you. That's who his character is. And that's also why I wasn't surprised at Nick's actions, because this is who his character is, whether you have noticed it or not. His previous decisions told me that he might make a choice like this. There were clues, there were clear signs, and I think people missed them solely because his romance with June was so intense. And yes, that's real. I think that's the realest thing about Nick's character. But people were paying attention to what Nick was doing without actually asking themselves what Nick's values are. And I can't even blame the audience for this, because this is exactly what June did too. June took his actions at face value and thought, if this man is willing to attack Gilead for me, then he's anti-Gilead. Plain and simple. And it wasn't until her mom called him a Nazi that I think she even considered, oh, how did he end up in Gilead? What are his values actually? Which is something I've been asking myself for the entire show. I've been waiting for years for Nick to say what he actually thinks, to say something about Mayday, to say something anti-Gilead. And I noticed that he was continually never speaking to his values, only speaking to what he could do for June. And I thought, it's weird for somebody who's doing so many rebellious acts to never say what they think about Gilead, or to never say how he got into it and apologize to June for it, and to feel really guilty about that. And just as a writer, I know the things that you leave out are as important as the things that you put in. So I was like, okay, if the writers are specifically not telling us what Nick feels at times where it would be really easy for Nick to say how he feels, then that's because they don't want us to know how he feels. I did a character analysis on Nick where I said he was really manipulated into joining the Sons of Jacob, and that was absolutely true. I stand by that. I think it's a really important point, because I think that men his age often are taken in by far-right movements by promising that, like, hey, your life is going to get better if you join us, without those young men really being told the implications for other people if they join this movement. The rights of marginalized people really aren't talked about. They aren't the focus of these far-right movements. It's just, how can we make you, young white guys' lives better? And Nick was this young guy who was very disenfranchised, who couldn't hold down a job, who didn't have mental or financial stability. He was the exact kind of man they were looking for. Someone who was insecure and who wanted better for himself and was willing to do whatever it took to get that, because he felt like he was at rock bottom. And honestly, I don't even blame Nick for that, because I think all of us are a lot more prone to manipulation than we like to believe, but I absolutely do blame him for the entitlement instilled in him from the patriarchy that allowed him to keep going with Gilead. And likewise, the entitlement of a lot of young men in the far-right movement that allow them to keep going, allow them to say, hey, other people's lives are clearly getting worse. I see that now with my own two eyes, but I want my life to be better. Because sure, at first Nick didn't know what was going to happen, but there became a point where it was pretty obvious what was going on, and at no point did he step away and be like, I cannot be part of this. And that's because Nick does not have a very strong value system, and he's kind of selfish. And that's what I've always seen Nick with time and time again, that he's not inherently evil or inherently sexist or misogynistic. It's that he's inherently selfish. He prioritizes his own interest again and again. He started fighting Gilead when that became in his interest because June was his biggest interest. Everything he's done seems motivated by his love for June, not his hatred for Gilead. And that became much clearer this season. I think it became clearer to June because of what her mother said. Because after Holly said that to her, she straight up asks Nick, like, why did you team up with the Americans? And that was June clearly looking to know what is his values. And he immediately says, I had to do it to see you after that attack, and I had to see you. Once again, it all comes back to June. He could have teamed up with the Americans a long time ago if he really wanted to take down Gilead. He didn't want to until he could see June. That flashback with Nick and June, I think, is so telling when he tells her, like, you wouldn't have been interested in me. I would have been some guy bagging groceries. I would have been nothing to you. Because it hits on the fact that even in Gilead, even when he has more power in the back of his mind, he's still thinking about who he was pre-Gilead. He still feels like a loser pre-Gilead. Those insecurities that drove him to the sons of Jacob, they're still there. And before Gilead, he was a man who resented his lot in life. He resented that it made him less attractive to women. He resented that he didn't have money or any power. He felt entitled to those things. And everything that brought him into the fold in Gilead, they were still there. Again, not an evil guy, but an insecure one, and one who always prioritizes himself. At any point, he could have taken a risk to try to take things down from within, and he really doesn't. If it doesn't involve June, my man is not risking his life to do it. And we see this selfishness in other parts of Nick's life. Like, he never asks about his daughter. I mean, what he wants so badly is June, to run away with June, but he rarely asks about the child that they made together. And now he's got a wife that he actually likes in Gilead and a son coming, and he's willing to say goodbye to them completely, leave them in Gilead where they are still clearly at risk, to run off with June. This man wants what he wants, and he does what he needs to do to get it. And I think about his first marriage with Eden, and yeah, Eden was a child. He was never going to be attracted to Eden. I didn't expect that of him, but when he married that little girl, I think he had a responsibility to her to at least take care of her, make sure that she's comfortable and happy to some degree. And she was so unhappy. She was so distraught that Nick clearly didn't want her, didn't care about her. And Nick really never spoke to her, never explained things to her. Here is this brainwashed little girl in Gilead who maybe he can have a positive influence on, who maybe he can explain how the world used to work to. And instead, he allows her to feel ignored, feel isolated. He resents the marriage and he just wants nothing to do with her. This is a young girl. And yeah, you could argue that, like, oh, talking to her was a risk to his life. He couldn't say anything, it would have risked him. But once again, that's his selfishness. He was going to prioritize him and his needs over the needs of this little girl that was literally brainwashed by Gilead, who was objectified by Gilead. He didn't have an honest, empathetic conversation with her until she was sentenced to lose her life. And he even says that he owes her an apology. He could have been nicer, he could have been kinder, he could have comforted her more, and he didn't. That's absolutely true. Had he had that kind of conversation with her earlier, she probably wouldn't have lost her life. Maybe they could have came up with an arrangement where she could see her man on the side. He could see June. They'd still be living in Gilead, but it could have been less insufferable for her if he helped her unlearn what she learned in Gilead. But he's just not the kind of guy who's going to risk his own life and his own safety. And after he ruins the operation with Mayday, his very first thought is, how can I get out of this? I just need to escape with June. As if she wasn't going to find out and not want to have anything to do with him. Now, there are going to be people who defend what Nick did, who say he didn't have a choice. It was either say what's going to happen or end up on the wall. And to that, I need you to ask yourself, if it had been June, if it had been Moira, would they have given themselves away or would they have ended up on the wall? There are people who care more about the destruction of Gilead than their own safety. June's one of those people. Moira is definitely one of those people. Nick is not one of those people. He absolutely does not have a strong enough value system to hate Gilead and self-sacrifice to make sure that it cannot continue the way it has continued. And he could have done way less risky behaviors that would not have landed him on the wall for a long time. He could have been helping the Americans for a long time. He didn't until it got him something with June. He always prioritizes June. She's all he cares about. And in caring about her, he made it seem like he did care about Gilead. But at the end of the day, he doesn't, at least not anywhere near the extent to someone like June does. So I wasn't at all surprised at his lack of conviction. I think the signs were always there. It's just that his intense romance with June kind of masked it. But this was not a man who was an activist, who was a rebel, who was acting in line with his values. He's still that insecure guy who just wants what he wants. Even if he doesn't want other people to get hurt in the process, he's also not willing to sacrifice himself to make sure other people don't get hurt. But even though I was predicting this character arc for Nick, the one thing I thought would happen was that it would happen much later in the show. It would be towards the end. And the fact that it's happening now makes me think that Nick is going to try to redeem himself in some way. I'm hoping when he does, it's not yet again just something he does for June. I hope this moment is like a reckoning for him of like, who am I? What are my values actually? I hope he can no longer avoid these questions anymore and he has to figure them out. And he actually does try to take Gilead down from within. But we just got to keep our fingers crossed. I'm looking forward to the next episode. If you want more Handmaid's Tale content, make sure you subscribe. And don't forget to reserve a copy of my book today. Again, it supports me so much.